My marriage was a real mistake. In fact, it was the worst mistake of my life. The main problem wasn't my wife. She was fine. My problem was her mother, a real dragon who hated me more than anything and never missed an opportunity to do me a disservice. Sure, I wasn't a really good guy, not at all. But I wasn't a bad guy either. There are good and bad sides to every person. Nobody's perfect. I never pretended to be a saint, and, truth be told, I was involved in a few less than honorable cases, but I never went to jail for anything. I came very close to doing so once, but my friend Nicholas, who was in law school at the time, saved me. Nicholas and I have been friends since high school. He's a short guy with thick glasses, and he's always been more interested in reading books than teasing girls with the rest of us. When a few of the boys at school chose him as the victim of their bullying, I felt sorry for him and told them all that I would beat the crap out of anyone who dared to hurt Nicholas. Two of the boys did, and I kept my word. Today, as I start writing this story, I am 32 years old. I am a self-employed driller, meaning I drill wells about 100 meters deep for heat pipes and make a good living at it. I have been married to Lizette for almost 6 years, and we have a son who was born just 5 months after we were married. We have a nice house in a small Scandinavian town, and we could be the most ordinary family. But we are not because of her mother, the dragon, who hates me so much for getting her daughter pregnant while she had a boyfriend of her mother's choice. I have to say that I have lost many battles, but hopefully I will emerge victorious in the last round. It all started on a summer night's eve about 6 years ago. Midsummer Night is the shortest night of the year, and here in Scandinavia, it has been celebrated as a holy night since ancient times when the Vikings ruled here. It is a romantic night with midnight sun in the north and only a few hours of soft twilight in the south. There are raucous parties everywhere. I was engaged to a beautiful girl named Lottie at the time, and we had planned to move in together on August 1st, when I was promised a 2-bedroom apartment in exchange for the 2 rooms I had now. But now Lottie and I were arguing about her going to her cousin's wedding on Midsummer's Eve. I had not been invited with her, which was a serious breach of etiquette, for engaged couples are considered equal to married couples and should always be invited together. I was sure that other engaged people were not invited as singles. Lottie also realized that this was a humiliation for me because of my old reputation as a bad boy. I had never done anything bad to my girlfriend or her cousin, whom I didn't even know. Lottie agreed that I was right, but refused to pick me for this wonderful evening and not stay home after the wedding. If the damn wedding had been any other weekend, I would have happily stayed away, and even if I had been invited, I would have done my best to find an excuse not to go. I didn't blame my cousin. She chose her own guests and skipped those she didn't like. I blamed Lottie for accepting such a humiliating invitation in the middle of summer on the most important day of the year. We began to argue, and when she left my apartment in anger on the morning of Midsummer's Eve, our engagement was broken off. I told her that if her damn cousin was more important than her boyfriend, she could stay there forever because I didn't want her back. An hour later, I regretted losing her and called her cell phone several times throughout the day, but it was turned off. Lottie and I were also invited to a big party at a friend's cottage. I went there alone and had a good time as the new bachelor. At the party, I danced several times with a rather nice girl named Lizette, who was there with her wimpy fiancé, who had a drinking problem. I didn't know her very well at the time, but I found her quite attractive. When her boyfriend had too much to drink, I offered to help her dump him in the back seat of his car. Lizette and I returned to the party briefly, and then took a walk in the romantic twilight to a nearby lake. We walked out onto a small pier, sat down and started cuddling tightly. I think she was impressed with my old and unfaithful reputation as a bad boy. No one can explain why, as a rule, beautiful women are attracted to bad guys. Apparently it's always been that way, because there's an old saying, "Naughty boys sleep with pretty girls." She was just in love with me, and didn't mind when we went to the guest room that she and her boyfriend had rented for that night. And then we fell asleep and didn't wake up until the next morning when her boyfriend screamed like crazy upon discovering Lizette and me. Lizette's boyfriend threw his wedding ring at her, which obviously meant he dumped her right away. When my own, now ex-girlfriend Lottie came back from the wedding, she called me and said she was sorry for the whole trip, and I was right in that she was the only invited guest without her lover, which really humiliated her and ruined the whole wedding for her. She tried to call me several times on Midsummer's Eve to apologize, which I verified later when I checked the incoming messages on my cell phone. She begged me to meet with her and talk about our situation, to which I agreed. But when she called me again an hour later after hearing about me having fun with Lizette, she was absolutely furious and screamed that she was glad our engagement was a thing of the past. At first, I didn't care, but after 2 weeks, I called her several times, expecting her to calm down. Each time I got the same answer and was offered a camping trip to a hot place. I even called Lizette a few times, but she refused to see me, and I had almost forgotten about her when 2 months later she rang my doorbell. She had a concerned look on her face and wanted to talk to me. I asked her to come in. She got straight to the point. I'm pregnant, and you're the father. Then she started crying. We talked for several hours, and she told me that I was the first and only man to ever have intercourse with her. She was going to keep the baby and asked me if I was man enough to share in the consequences of what we had done. What could I say? Even I realized that two parents were the best thing for a child and agreed to give our relationship a fair try. Lisette was a beautiful, sweet, and soft girl with a reputation for being a family girl. Not as sweet as Lottie, but not a bad choice for a wife. We decided to get married as soon as possible. Of course, love is an important part of marriage, and neither of us could deny that there was some hot love during our holy night. We both believed it would flare up between us again when we had a child. Lisette spent the night with me. She told me she was very happy. I had made my decision, and I intended to carry it out in the best way possible. The next day, we traveled together to her parents to tell them the news. It was both the first and the last time I visited her parents' house. Her mother turned my visit into a real fuss. Instead of trying to make the best of the circumstances, she started yelling at me, calling me a damned bully who had soiled her innocent daughter. She threatened to sue me and promised to punish me in every way possible. Her father was obviously a miserable wimp who let the dragon spit fire without saying a word about it. Not the best relatives in town. Her parents were the second-generation owners of the family print shop, and her mother was the feared boss. Their business had once been the leading print shop in the entire region, but now it was going under. The European Union, which at the time included 15 countries, as an internal market meant stiff competition with plenty of new printing capacity available at low prices for the most important customers. In addition, new countries such as Poland and Hungary, with good printing facilities, were close to joining the EU and were already doing business successfully with the old members. Lisette's family was making good profits in the old days, but not investing much in the latest equipment and losing customers, which was driving them into the red numbers. I was unemployed at the time, and Lisette's mother, seeing a chance to get me under her control, demanded that I start working at the print shop for a measly wage. I refused and preferred to live on unemployment benefits, which gave me more money than what she was offering. Since I had an unlimited amount of free time, I even worked part-time for a certain driller. Lisette's mother started our vendetta by complaining to the unemployment fund that I refused to accept the job offered, which was against the rules. She got nothing for it. She then had a lawyer draw up a prenuptial agreement in which I had no rights to anything if things got bad between me and Lisette, which was what her mother wanted. I asked Nicholas to rewrite the agreement to make it fairer, and Lisette signed it without telling her mother. 2 months later, Lisette and I were married in the town hall. It was a simple ceremony with 2 witnesses, Nicholas and Lisette's best friend. 5 months later, we had a glorious baby boy. Our relationship gradually grew into something that could be considered true love, and the next 2.5 years were the happiest, very happy years of our marriage. A few months after we were married, I had the opportunity to buy a rock drilling business on favorable terms. Its owner signed up for a beginner's square dance class and met a wonderful woman there. She was a doctor with a temporary job at a local hospital, and when she was offered a very well-paying job in northern Norway, she made an offer to the driller, who accepted and sold his business to me. Since both the doctor and the driller signed a personal guarantee for me, I had no problem getting the necessary amount of money from the bank. Then, when our boy turned 2.5 and we put him in daycare, the problems began. Lizette started working at the print shop again, and as she was expected to be the next owner and boss, her nasty mother's influence grew. In the good times, Lizette's greedy mother bought large sums of stock and trusted her broker because her stock went up at a time when almost everything was going up. But then, when times got tough, her broker did a bad job, causing her to lose a lot of money before she could stop him. At the same time, I got inside information from Nicholas, who is now a lawyer, about an unexpected big boom in one of the companies, bought the stock, and made excellent money on the opportunity. I couldn't resist the temptation to punish Lizette's mother, so I bragged to Lizette that thanks to a new computer analysis program, I had made a really big profit, and there was more to come. I told her to go to our garage to get a surprise car. It was a nearly new Toyota Yaris that I had bought at a bargain price for Lisette to use as a shopping car. Of course, she told her mother about it, who was jealous of me and told Lisette to find out about my next purchase. I asked Nicholas to find some real junk stocks and put together a very complicated-looking nonsense program in Excel that showed a very good expected return on Mega X stock. I'm sure Lisette got into my laptop and told her mother, who made a large investment just before the junk stock started sinking like a stone. One evening, Lisette asked me, "Did you lose any money on Mega X stock?" "No, I bought some when they were low and sold it all when they were at the top." "That's good for us. Why do you ask?" "It's come to my attention that some people have lost a lot of money on them." Gambling on the stock market is always a risky business. I had won an important battle against her mother, but she suspected that my bad advice was done on purpose, and so there were rumors going around town that she intended to step up her efforts to cause me trouble. There was nothing to worry about, for she had been doing her best all along. She bet her friends that she would talk her daughter into making me cuckolded, divorced, and dispossessed before our boy went to school. So she always invited the single young sons of her friends and business acquaintances to her parties, hoping some of them would seduce Lisette. Many of them were well-educated, well-mannered. She'd had a boyfriend when I did, and why should it be any different now? Especially after her mother had brainwashed her for a long time into dumping me. Her mother probably still thought Lisette would get most of my assets to invest in a printing company when I dumped her, having received more humiliation than I could bear. Hate, revenge, and money were good reasons for her mother's foul play against me. I told Lisette that I knew about the bet, and if her mother managed to find a gigolo to sleep with her, she would be kicked out immediately. Lisette got angry and screamed, "What the hell do you think of me? Don't you think I know about this damn bet, and I'll be mad as hell if anyone tries anything?" Good call. Keep it, and we'll have no reason to discuss the matter any further. When Lisette started working full-time, our family life began to slowly sink lower and lower. I wanted us to have another child, but Lisette refused. Our life, which had been on a good and sometimes very good level while she stayed home with the baby, became a chore. I didn't complain much at first because Lisette was working hard to survive in a printing business that her mother with her antiquated manners couldn't stop from losing customers. My business was doing so well that I offered Lisette to work for me instead of her mother, but she declined. With oil prices rising, a thermal heating system was a very profitable investment, which meant very good business for me. Although I had a lot to do, I tried to help Lisette around the house as much as possible. Our marriage was not at its best, but for many years after she went back to work, it remained at an acceptable level. We had some good moments from time to time. I was really doing my best, trying to convince her to quit her now very lousy paying job and free herself from her mother's bad influence. But things went in the opposite direction. Lisette started taking the baby with her and spending more weekends at her parents' cottage than at home. After a while, I got fed up with it, and we had our first real fight. She realized that her mother had taken her too far and agreed to spend more time at home. But it was an empty, soon-to-be-forgotten promise. Just 3 months after our serious quarrel, she was back to her addiction, which meant that our social life with friends was reduced to a bare minimum. Of course, I was no dumber and realized that now, after years of fruitless attempts, her mother had finally succeeded in getting us to distance ourselves from each other. Our son told me about some Tommy kissing mom when they came home from their last weekend at her mother's house. It wasn't a surprise. It was bound to happen sooner or later, and now I knew for sure the shit had hit the fan. I realized that our marriage was close to being history, despite my best efforts to be a good husband. Sure, I was saddened by my failure, but to my great surprise, a sense of immense relief began to grow. I could look forward to a future without a nasty mother-in-law who tried her best to ruin my life. In recent years, Lisette, to my increasing frustration, had always chosen her mother's side, so I didn't care if she chose her mother in her final decision. However, I felt it was my duty to give her one last honest chance to be a good wife again and save the marriage if she was interested. She got her chance the following Friday. In the evening, Lisette told me, as usual, that she was sorry, but that she had to go to her mother's on Saturday morning and would be back sometime on Sunday, which probably meant evening. I decided it was time to let her make the final choice herself. Frankly, I didn't care what she did anymore, but I felt sorry for our son and decided to suggest that she change her weekend plans and save our marriage, so I replied, "Please don't go. You were there last weekend. Why don't you stay home so our family can do something together? We could invite some friends over and have a barbecue. It's been a while since we've done anything like that." She was surprised and replied, "I promised my mom I'd be there and help her with her friends." Visiting friends? Why are they so much more important to you than our own friends? Or do you mean one special male friend? Who's that damn Tommy who seems to be spending the whole weekend with you? Will he be there? When I mentioned Tommy, there was surprise and consternation in her eyes for a second. Then she replied, "He's an old friend of our family and helps my mom, and sometimes me, understand some of the EU rules. He's not a friend of mine, so I don't know if mom invited him." "How old is he?" "I think he's 30. "And he's a handsome bachelor, I suppose?" "No, he's married, but his wife is on a 3-month temporary job with the United Nations administration in Kosovo, so he can help his mother on weekends." Her explanation about helping with the complicated rules of the European Union sounded reasonable, but why would a man of his age want to spend the weekend with such a greedy old dragon? "And what's your relationship with this Tommy guy? It sounds like you'd rather spend the weekend with him than your husband." Again, I noticed the split second of fear in her eyes before she replied, "Strictly business, of course. What the hell do you think of me?" "I don't know anymore. You cheated on your boyfriend when you and I met. Who says you won't cheat again?" "Don't insult me. Things were different. I was young and fell in love with you, and you should know that I still love you." "You say that, but let's be clear about our relationship today. You have very strange ways of showing what you call love these days. Really, it's nothing to brag about. Our marriage is a parody of a real marriage. Our so-called sex life is practically non-existent. You'd rather leave your husband and spend weekends with this Tommy. Yet you keep saying you love me, but I can't understand how the hell you can think I would believe such nonsense after what you do to me. I'm completely fed up with your damn mom and her vile antics in our family, and I'm willing to offer you fair divorce terms so you can do whatever you want with your darling Tommy." She hadn't expected a divorce offer, and her face took on an ashy gray hue as she screamed, "Divorce? Are you serious? You can't ask for a divorce because I want to see my mother. Are you out of your mind? That's no reason for a divorce." "No, it's not. But I don't see any good reason for you to see her from morning to night 7 days a week, every week. If your own family still means something to you, please skip Tommy and stay home for the weekend so we can talk about our problems and try to find a solution before it's too late. Please do that if you still love me like you say you do." "Of course I love you, but I promised my mom I would go and I have to go. I wish I could stay with you, but please be patient with me and I promise you will be well rewarded. Have you forgotten that next Friday is Midsummer's Eve and we'll be together all day? And we'll spend a whole week together 24 hours a day at the cottage in July. What a favor. At the end of next month, I get a whole week together with my beautiful, beloved wife. Now that's a gift from heaven. And may I suppose that your favor to me on Midsummer's Eve is due to circumstances such as the fact that Tommy will be somewhere else during the vacation? Maybe he's going to spend the vacation with his wife and won't have time for you? Poor you. Or do you still remember that I left Lottie because she left me on Midsummer's Eve? Now she sobbed, "You're not funny. You're pathetic. Do you think it's funny to be married to you? I must say you have a strange way of showing your love." Okay, Lizette, I know I can't stop you from dating that wimp because he's more important to you than your family, but you have to take the baby with you because tomorrow I'll be servicing drilling equipment and won't be able to take care of him at the same time. Now she was truly angry and screamed, "You're accusing me of cheating, treating me like a whore. Mom's right. You're a real bastard." She then started crying loudly. And at this point, I put my foot down and realized that there was something between her and this Tommy guy, but I didn't give it any more thought. There was little left of our marriage, perhaps nothing at all. However, I made one last attempt to save it. The only reason I did not leave her at once and tell her that she must leave our home for good was that I would have gotten much better terms for a divorce if I had caught her cheating. I saw no reason for further argument with Lizette and thought it would be advantageous to absent myself from the house for an hour or two. I felt like having a large drink of whiskey, and since I never liked to drink alone, I went to my favorite pub, which was probably one of the best decisions of my life. After having a drink at the bar, I noticed Mona, a friend of my ex-girlfriend Lottie, sitting in a booth with her husband. I approached them and asked if she knew how Lottie's life was going now. She replied, "Don't you know she's back in town? She divorced Sven, bought a small house here, and moved in about 2 weeks ago. She's been asking about you. Why don't you call her and talk to her directly instead of through me?" Mona gave me Lottie's phone number, and I decided to call her right away. Sure, she might ask me to get the hell out and stay where I was. But, I thought, whoever dares wins. So I called her and she answered, "Lottie. Hi, I'm Michael, ex-boyfriend, if you remember me. Mona told me you were back in town and I just wanted to welcome you back." The crucial moment had come. How would she take my call? To my great delight, she was happy to hear from me, and we had a long and pleasant conversation. She even accepted my invitation to lunch on Saturday. My spirits lifted afterward, and I spent the rest of the evening with Mona and her husband. Much to my relief, Lisette pretended to be asleep when I got home, and I was asleep when she left for her mother's on Saturday morning. I did a little work on the rig in the morning, and at 1 o'clock stood waiting for Lottie outside the restaurant I had suggested for our lunch. I can't deny that I had almost the same feelings I had on my first date with her almost 8 years ago. When I waited 15 minutes and Lottie still wasn't there, I began to wonder if she would even come. But then she came. She was still a very beautiful woman, and now even more feminine in some ways than when I had seen her a few years ago. With her was her little daughter Jennifer. When she hugged me, I immediately felt a strong desire for her. She noticed this and was almost frightened, but calmed down when I stopped making any further attempts to be anything other than a friend. We had a very pleasant lunch, and afterward decided to take a walk in a nearby park. During the walk, she asked me out of the blue, "What was your real reason for wanting to see me again?" "Faith, hope, and charity." A confused expression appeared on her face, whereupon she asked me, "Do you mind if I tell you something I've wanted to tell you for years?" I said, "Okay, go ahead." She told me, "I've made 3 big mistakes in my life. Going to that damn wedding was my first big mistake. You were right. I was humiliated as hell when the host tried to force me and the groom's asshole brother to do things together all the time. When the groom asked me if I had feelings for his brother, I got pissed and asked him to go to hell and take his brother with him. Then I left the party. I didn't invite them to my and Sven's wedding, which really pissed them off. I thought you would forgive me and accept me back when I got home. But then Lizette's boyfriend called and said you took Lizette's cherry that she was saving for their wedding night. I was still in love with you, and pissed off, I made a second big mistake by refusing to talk to you when you called me. I only got together with Sven to punish you and intended to dump him and get you back. But then Lizette got pregnant, and it ruined everything. I admired you for taking care of her, but cried many nights because I had been so stupid and lost you. Then I married Sven, which was my third big mistake. If I hadn't been such a stupid idiot, you and I could have gotten married. I replied, I made a grave mistake too when I seduced Lisette on that Midsummer's Eve. Of course, you and I broke up and I was free to do what I wanted, but I should have used common sense and tried to win you back before moving on. Believe me, I really regretted it many times. But it's never too late to try again, is it? She was completely surprised. What did you say? Lisette and I are having problems, serious problems. I know she's cheating on me, but I don't have any proof yet. Last night, before I went to the pub to meet Mona, I asked her to stay home for the weekend rather than go to her mother and her lover's house. But she decided to go. I've decided it's finito between us. I'm going to divorce her as soon as I get the proof I need, or if I can't get it, I'll still do it within a month. Oh my God, I thought you two were happy. We were very happy. You know the old saying, if you can't get the girl you love, love the girl you got? It worked out for us. After a while, I fell in love with her very much. Real true love, but now it's over. What about you? Are you seeing anyone? She looked me straight in the eyes and replied, Yes, I met a handsome man online, but we haven't met in real life yet. We're having our first lunch date tomorrow. So I'm late for the date? However, I would like to apply to be some sort of replacement for this lucky guy. Just in case he's not the prince of your dreams. What do you say? She kept her eyes on me and was silent for a few seconds before replying, Isn't this date a real date for you? I could only reply, Seeing you tonight is the best thing I've done in a long time, but I'm selfish enough to want to see you more, maybe even as more than just a friend. She shook her head. No, I don't think it's a good decision to have you as some sort of replacement, not at all. Then, noticing the disappointment in my eyes, she continued, You are my first choice, and if you are serious and promise to be honest with me, I don't need any substitutes, and I will cancel my date. Today is my lucky day. Please remember that I never cheated on you when we were engaged. You left me, and I was lonely when I met Lisette. I won't cheat on her before we break up. But you and I have kids almost the same age, and we can start being friends. That is, if you want to. I've rented a nice summer house on the coast for the third week of July, and I can promise you that before that time, Lisette and I will be separated in different directions. In the evening, Lottie invited me to dinner at her house, and we began to make plans for the coming weeks. Jennifer and I were already good friends, and she had no ill feelings about her mother having a boyfriend. I spent the night in Lottie's spare room, and on Sunday, we went to the coast. Lisette came home late Sunday night, and we didn't talk for long before going to bed. The next week passed in silence. She was obviously in a very bad mood after I suggested she get a divorce. The following Friday was the eve of Midsummer's Eve. Lottie and Jennifer spent it with Lottie's parents. Lisette and I were invited to spend the evening at a neighbor's house where several families with children of various ages had gathered. We spent most of the afternoon playing with the children. Then, in the evening, we adults played fun games and danced, but I hardly talked to Lisette or danced a single dance with her. She usually pretended to be a good, loving wife when we went out, but now neither she nor I cared that everyone could see how we had grown cold to each other. On Midsummer's Day, she went to her mother's house but didn't stay the night, probably because Tommy wasn't there. Lottie invited me to her parents' house and I spent a few hours there. They wished Lottie and me luck in our new relationship. The week after Midsummer passed with a chill in the relationship between Lisette and me. We were polite and correct with each other, but neither of us showed the slightest sign of affection. The following weekend, Lisette and our son went on a 3-day bus tour with her parents to Legoland, the famous children's amusement park, and after that, she was going on her annual 2-day visit to her cousin. I was happy that I was able to spend 4 nights at Lottie's house. Of course, both Lottie and I wanted to get on with it, but in case Lisette intended to fight for a divorce, it would be advantageous to be the faithful party, and so we decided to wait. Lottie, her girlfriend, and I had a pleasant time together while Lizette was away. Lottie and I found that we still enjoyed each other's company very much. True love. During the summer, Lizette and I were usually very busy at work, so we decided to spend only 2 weeks of vacation, and only one, the last one, together in a summer house I rented on the coast. Instead of our usual summer vacation, we were going to go to Thailand for 2 weeks in November. These plans had been made before Tommy had burst into her life, but under the present circumstances, I no longer had any intention of going anywhere with Lizette. Instead, I had promised Lottie that I would leave Lizette before the beginning of this week, and she had agreed to spend it with me at the summer house, and I intended to fulfill my promise. I think Lizette finally realized that she had created far more serious problems in our marriage than she intended, and started trying to pretend to be a good wife again. To my great surprise, she called me all 4 nights while she was away and told me how much she missed me. She had never called me before during all those weekends she spent at her parents' house. Every time she called me, I wanted to talk to my son. During the second day of their trip to Legoland, I asked him a few short, simple questions, all of which he answered yes to. One of those questions was, "Is Tommy with you?" And the answer was, yes. I don't think any of the adults noticed this. I'm guessing that the reason she called was because she was racked with guilt about taking Tommy with her. And when they got home, I got further proof from my boy when they stayed home one night between the 2 trips. He asked me if it was true that nasty wolves could come into our house and eat him. I asked him, "Who told you such a nasty story?" "Grandma?" "Why did Grandma tell you such a nasty lie? What did you do to her?" "Nothing yet, but we have a secret, and if I tell you about it, the wolves will come and eat me." I tried to be sneaky and told him, "What secret? The fact that Tommy was with you and Mom is not some real secret. Your mom told me that she and Tommy lived in one room and you and Grandma slept in another." "You knew my secret." "Yes, I did, but a secret is a secret. There are no wolves, of course not. But promise me you won't tell Mama that we talked about your secret." Lisette let a damned dragon threaten my boy. She was going to pay for it. My next step was to call Nicholas, tell him my concerns, and cancel the visit. Then I talked to Lottie and my friend Dan, who agreed to help me. Having fun with a married woman in her marital bed tends to give him a sense of his own superiority over his horny husband. I was counting on Tommy not being able to resist the lure of such great pleasure when I was on vacation, so I put an expensive little wireless TV camera in our bedroom with a receiver connected to video from an extra long-playing cassette tape hidden in the garage. The camera was connected to a motion sensor and worked even in almost total darkness. I had already tested it several times with good results, so it was ready to go. In my rig company's Nissan King cab, I stored new house locks and cardboard boxes to pack Lizette's clothes and belongings in when it was time for her to move out of my house. After 2 agonizing days at home, with Lizette now pretending to be a caring wife, I packed clothes for myself and our boy for a week's vacation, and Saturday morning we left as planned. Lizette told me that she was sorry she had to stay home and work that week, and would miss us very much. I didn't kiss her goodbye, but I promised to call her at least once a day. She even stood in the driveway and waved to us as we drove away. I felt sorry that the woman I loved so much had turned into such a lying whore. But instead of driving to Nicholas's cottage, I went to Lottie's garage where I hid my car. Nicholas and his wife were aware of my problems and agreed to pretend I was there, but to come out at the same moment if Lizette called them. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Lottie drove past my house but saw nothing unusual there. At 8 o'clock, she went on another excursion, and when she returned, she told me that this time she saw a metallic silver Volvo XC90 in my driveway. Usually, people are visiting friends and relatives in the summer, so no neighbor would be bothered by a strange car in someone's driveway at this time. At 11 o'clock, I took Lottie's car on a field trip, and the Volvo was still there. At 1 o'clock, I rode Lottie's bike there, snuck into my garage, and turned on the monitor. Bingo, exactly what I wanted to see. Lizette and a man coming out of the bathroom. Now that I knew I had all the proof I needed to get a divorce on my terms, I was starting to feel a little better about this crazy situation. Lisette was not stupid. Not at all. So I was somewhat surprised at how clumsily she was deceiving me. It was like she wanted to get caught and made it easy for me. First, she took Tommy with her on vacation, and then she let her nasty mother threaten our son with wolves. Who knows? Maybe she wanted to be abandoned, and Tommy had to take care of her. I waited until they were asleep, however, and watched them on the monitor before proceeding with my plan. They lay down on the bed, and Lisette said to him, "Let's get some sleep so we can be in good shape." He replied, "I'm going to miss you so much that every weekend without you will be terribly agonizing. Even when my wife is home. Why can't we see each other at least once a month in the future?" Because my marriage is in a much worse crisis than I could have anticipated. Michael is still so angry about my weekend with you that he didn't even bother to kiss me goodbye when he left for a week. I made the terrible mistake of not staying home that damn weekend when he begged me to. My marriage has been a mess ever since. You're a wonderful lover, but I want my husband and I to have a good life again. "It's too late for that, you damn whore," I said to myself before Tommy replied. "You don't have to regret anything that weekend. I had a good time, and you have to agree that once a month in the future, we'll have something to look forward to." She sounded a little annoyed now, and was undoubtedly beginning to feel remorseful when she replied, "No, Tommy, when you left after breakfast, our wonderful love story became history, and I turned into a good, faithful, loving wife who does everything, I mean everything, to win her husband's love again. But why think about that now? Until then, I'm still only yours. Be a good boy, and don't waste a minute of our good time." I didn't hear his reply, but obviously he couldn't entertain her further without resting for a few hours, and after a while, they both fell asleep. I pressed a button on my cell phone. My friend Dan woke up after a few beeps and I told him, "I have bingo. Are you ready to play?" He promised to be there within 15 minutes. I could take care of Tommy in my bed myself. The main reason I wanted my friend present was that he could testify that I had used no force on either Tommy or Lisette. If I had gone in there alone, I'm sure her mother would have found some lawyer who would have made up a nasty story and sued me for being rude. Another good reason was that Dan owned a very good video camera and loved to use it. He was often hired to shoot weddings, and I wanted some close-ups that I didn't have on my own camera. Dan arrived as promised. We had a short briefing on how to do it, and then snuck into my house. The door to the bedroom was closed. I opened it a few centimeters to see them both sleeping under the covers, very close together. As Dan got his camera equipment ready, he nodded and I said, "Let's do it." I opened the door, Dan turned on a bright battery-powered halogen light, and started filming. I walked over to the bed, pulled back the blanket without waking them, and let Dan film for at least 5 seconds before yelling, "What the hell is this?" They woke up in complete surprise. It took a few seconds for them to realize what was happening, and until their eyes got used to the harsh light. Then Lisette recognized me and started screaming, "No, no, 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 no!" I took the camera in my hands and told Dan to lead a naked Tommy out of my house. Dan grabbed Tommy firmly by the hair and dragged him off the bed toward the bedroom exit. There was some noise and yelling, but I was in the bedroom and couldn't see what happened. Dan returned a short time later, looking for Tommy's keys. He found them in his pants, went outside, and threw them in the driveway. Then we heard him driving away. Meanwhile, Lisette stopped screaming and started crying. I think she realized her game was over because she didn't make any silly attempts to explain what had happened. I told her, "You have dissolved our marriage. Get dressed and get out of my house. You don't have a car anymore, so Dan will call a cab for you. Tomorrow, there will be new locks on the doors. I'll pack your things in cardboard boxes, and you can pick them up tomorrow afternoon." She started yelling at me. "You can't do that. You have no right to do such nasty things to your wife. I will never accept it. I don't care what you do or don't do. Please read our prenuptial agreement. A copy of it is kept in your personal bank safe. You are leaving this house. Please don't do this to me. Please calm down and let us talk." "Sure, we can talk tomorrow. Be here tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to get your things and share everything we own together. Come alone. Remember, your parents aren't allowed to stick their trashy feet on my property. The cab arrived, and she had to wait 10 minutes before she was ready to go. Dan went home to bed, and I called Lottie and informed her that I had caught Lisette and a man named Tommy in the marital bed, which meant that my marriage was over, but I wanted to stay in the house until I changed the locks. The new locks were already stored in my king cab. I won the battle again, but felt only sadness for my broken marriage and how it ended. I couldn't sleep, so I went to the garage, got a videotape, put it in the VCR, rewound it, and pressed the button. Well, that's pretty much what happened. They were having fun. Then the screen went blank for a long time until it showed what I had already seen the night before, and then when Dan and I entered the room and their awakening. I was still too upset to sleep, so I started taking Lizette's clothes out of closets and drawers and folding them in the living room. At 9 in the morning, Lottie and the kids arrived at my house with breakfast in a basket. Digging through Tommy's wallet, I found his wife's phone number in Kosovo, called her, and told her I had found Tommy and his wife in my bed and videotaped it. She was furious, but asked me to send the pictures to her email, which I promised to do and did after I edited a copy of the video to show Lisette if she had any objections to my terms. I changed the locks, packed Lizette's belongings in perfect order, and wrote the contents on the outside of each box. I felt no need to retaliate by soiling or destroying any of her things. Then I took a chainsaw and cut our almost new and very expensive marital bed into small pieces, which I then threw in a pile in the driveway. Lottie and the kids even brought me lunch so I could take a break from work. Then, at 4 o'clock, a pale Lisette arrived alone in the old Ford Transit of the print shop. She took a long look at the pile that was our dear bed before entering. I made coffee in the living room and invited her to sit down. She agreed, sat down, and, sobbing, began to read me a long speech about how much she loved me and how sorry she was that she had made a terrible mistake and would never do it again, if I could only forgive her. She promised to work less at the print shop, spend all weekends with her family, never go to my mother's house for parties and dinners without me, and wanted us to have another child. I answered her. 3 weeks ago, you could have saved our marriage with those promises, but today, after what you've done since then, it's too late. I am sorry, Lisette, but there is no more future for us. She began her litany again. I let her continue and, when she was done, asked, "You must think I'm a complete idiot if you think I swallowed your lies about Tommy, a 30-year-old asshole who spent his weekends in the company of a disgusting old bitch like your mother." She didn't say anything, so I continued. "You're a very beautiful woman, Lisette, so I can't blame him. But I do blame you for being such a damn cheap whore that you let him break up our marriage and make our child very unhappy." Why, Lisette? Why? Was I such a bad husband that you had to have fun with that damn asshole? You weren't my first or best choice, but I married you when you needed me, and I even fell in love with you, Lisette. I have been a faithful husband to you until this very moment. She sobbed. It's not your fault. I never stopped loving you. You are my one true love, but I know you slept with many other women, and I had no other man but you. I'm sorry that I couldn't resist the temptation to do it with only one other man, and I can promise you that I won't have to do it again. I replied, however, now that you got what you wanted, I hope you're happy. At least your damn mother should be very happy. She got what she wanted the whole time we were together. Please make her even happier by telling her that I don't care about what you did, because thanks to your cheating, I got my freedom and married a woman who really loves me. Don't you realize that you ended our marriage that Friday before midsummer when I begged you to spend the weekend with your family and you chose to go and entertain that Tommy at your mother's house? Did you really think I'd agree to be a goddamn cuckold? The only reason I didn't throw you out of the house right now is because I wanted proof of your cheating, so I could get rid of you without paying you anything at all. Don't forget that I even offered you a fair divorce, but to my surprise you refused. An intelligent woman like you should have realized that I would never agree to be a poor cuckold husband to a whore wife. I didn't want a divorce then, and I don't want one now because I love you. Of course I realized that the baby told you about Tommy, and you suspected something. But I never thought you'd have proof. I regretted the affair, and promised myself that Tommy would be my first and last affair, but I decided to fulfill that promise as Tommy and I had planned. The night with him at our house was to be the grand finale, the very last with him and my last cheating affair ever. Honestly, I was glad it was over, and I can't deny that your behavior after that Friday made me think about the problems I had created for our marriage. I began to fear the worst when you treated me like air and refused to have fun with me. So I wanted to be a good wife again and do everything I could to win your love again, to really spoil you during our week at the cottage and do everything I could to get pregnant as soon as possible and give you the baby you wanted so badly. I even looked for a new job. I'm afraid it's too late now. I replied, "You're right. The Friday before midsummer was your last chance. You didn't care about me then, and now, after what happened last night, we only have one possible solution." I gave her the divorce papers and said, "Please sign them so we can do this the easy way." "What do you mean?" "Whatever you prefer, the easy way or the hard way, it will be under the terms of our prenuptial agreement. You keep a copy of it in your safety deposit box. You'll get everything that belongs to you, and I'll take what belongs to me, which is almost everything except your clothes. I want custody of our son, but you will be able to see him often once you have your own place. But I won't let you take him to the dragon's nest where you live now." She was very pale when she asked, "You mean that I have no right to get any of what we own?" "Yes. The house, the cars, my stocks and bank accounts, and the drilling company are my private property. Don't forget that it was your mother who demanded that we get a prenuptial agreement. I worked hard and made a good salary. I paid for everything here, and your dear mom only paid you pocket money that was barely enough for clothes. I hired professionals to investigate the printing business and found out what you should already know. It'll be bankrupt by the end of the year. Your mother owes you a lot of money. You must get what she owes you before her business declares bankruptcy, or the bank will take everything. If you agree to cooperate in our divorce, I can pay for an attorney to help you get your money. Your mother will lose it either way. Therefore, it is best for both her and you if you get it. Your mother may see this decision as a kick in the ass, but my main reason for helping you in this case is that with this money, you'll be able to afford to buy a decent apartment where you can take our son when it's your turn. I'm thinking about our child, and you're still his mother, even after what you did to him and to me." She now began her speech about how sorry she was and how she regretted everything she had done. I interrupted her by saying, "Please remember how I begged you to stop this and stay home for one weekend with me, but you chose to go have fun with Tommy instead of staying home with your family. You made your choice then, and now I've made mine." Her next attempt was to tell me that Tommy never entertained her. I pressed a button on the remote, and the video player came on. Lizette screamed hysterically, "Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!" I pressed the stop button and told her, "Sorry, Lizette, it's too much for a bloody husband." "Why, Lizette? Why did you do this to me? Why didn't you just tell me you wanted a divorce, and you would have gotten much better terms than you have now? Why humiliate me with this asshole?" She realized the game was over and started sobbing. I continued, "What's done is done, and it can't be undone, but we can do our best to find a reasonable solution. But if that damn dragon you call a mother tries to prank me again or stick his ugly nose in this case, that video will go on the internet for the whole town to see what a disgusting whore my ex-wife was. Do you understand?" Now she was scared and screamed, "You can't do that. What am I going to do? I have nothing left, and even my job is going to hell. May I suggest that you be a good girl and take the easy way out for our divorce? Just accept the terms of our prenuptial agreement and my terms without any objection. I promise to help you get your remaining paycheck. Please remember that you still have your great love, Tommy. He can take care of you just like I did when you cheated on your previous boyfriend." "He can't. He's married." "Not for long. His wife wasn't very happy when I talked to her this morning, and at noon, when she saw some pictures and clips from my video that I emailed her, she was very angry. She promised to drop it. Good news for you, Lizette. Tommy is yours from now on, Only yours. Oh my God, you must be out of your mind. How could you ruin their marriage? It wasn't hard at all. I found her phone number in his wallet that he left here last night. Have you already forgotten that the damn asshole entertained my wife in the marital bed and ruined my marriage? Lottie told me that she didn't want anything from my house, and all I wanted was everything in my home office, expensive music and home movies, and any artwork of any value. We decided to meet the following Saturday to share all of our family photos and videos. I let Lisette take everything she wanted. She didn't say a word about the almost new and very expensive marital bed she had seen cut into pieces and brought to the pile in the driveway. She promised to pick up her things as soon as she got her own apartment, and I intended to give the rest to the Salvation Army, which had a second-hand store in town. Lisette was pleased that I had made it easier for her to set up her apartment and said that she was very short of money at the moment, and after some thought agreed that getting the rest of her paycheck was a perfectly acceptable thing to do. Lisette took the easy way out, signed the divorce papers, and I helped her load her things into the van. When Lisette left my house, I went straight to Lottie's, who had prepared a romantic dinner for us. It was a great night, really. We were doing well, and these days it's nice to come home after work to a house filled with joy and laughter. And we are a family that does fun things together on the weekends. Lottie and I expected it would be a while before the kids accepted the new situation, and we were delighted when the kids got used to the new backup parent and each other's company almost immediately and played well together. The postcard was Dan's suggestion. I agreed, and he asked his mom to buy a beautiful greeting card, on which she wrote in the nicest handwriting. Dear friends, I must salute you for winning the bet. You did what every parent must dream of when you persuaded your only daughter to leave her good-loving husband and become a whore for a married cheating man. She should be very grateful to you for the rest of her life. Sincerely, your faithful friend. I mailed it to Lisette's father, who, as rumors in town later told me, objected to Tommy coming over every weekend to seduce Lisette, but his wife was silent. He felt both sadness and anger, as Lisette cried for hours after I left her. The card was the last straw on the poor camel's back, and he finally realized that if he had acted like a man, he should have put an end to his wife's madness. He regretted that he had turned out to be such a coward and had become a laughing stock among his acquaintances. Having had a few drinks, he plucked up courage and expressed his humble opinion to his wife. Their argument ended in a real fight, as a result of which she was hospitalized for a week and he spent the night in the police station. The day before she was discharged from the hospital, he packed his bags and left their home. Since they had no minor children, the divorce was finalized within 3 months. After Lisette took the easy way out of the divorce and accepted all of my terms without objection, she did not hire an attorney, and the divorce went through properly. I got custody of our child, but I promised Lisette I wouldn't cause her any problems, and she could see the child as much as she wanted, up to 182 days a year when she had her own place. But I would not allow her to take the child to her mother's house or cottage. Lisette didn't object to this because she had a bad relationship with her mother and had given up her job at the print shop. Her mother became furious when Lisette demanded her remaining wages, refused to pay her anything, and became furious when Lisette sued her. Lisette won the case, and the enforcement service managed to get her money 2 weeks before the print shop went bankrupt. The bank objected, but Nicholas found her a good lawyer who convinced the bank to withdraw its claim. Tommy's visit to my house on the occasion of his affair with Lisette did not last long, an intense and at first pleasant time that soon turned into a terrible nightmare for him. After I caught him in my bed and he drove off unclothed from my house in his Volvo, he was caught by traffic police officers monitoring drunk drivers returning home from parties. Lisette and he celebrated the happy ending of their love story with a nice dinner with my best Rioja wine and cognac. He, with no clothes on at all, was taken to the police station for a blood test. One of Lisette's friends told me later that word had reached her that he had been fined and stripped of his driver's license for 2 years. His wife did what she promised. She came home, left him, and filed for divorce. She now works for the UN in Geneva, Switzerland, where she lives with an Italian colleague she met while working for the UN in Kosovo. Tommy tried to resolve his personal problems with Dr. Booz, which caused him to have to take time out from his work. He never met Lisette again and never returned her many calls when she desperately tried to talk to him. He made promises to take care of her if she had marital problems. Now she learned the brutal truth. All his talk was just talk, and she had been naive enough to believe everything he told her. Eventually, she realized what a tragic man he really was and abandoned all her attempts and hopes for a happy future with him. The extra money from the printing business enabled her to buy an apartment in a good neighborhood, and she had no trouble finding a new job. Although we cooperate very well because of the baby, we never talk about anything personal. Lisette is a very beautiful woman and not a bad choice now that she's free of her mother's influence, so I'm a little confused as to why she's still not dating. Lottie and I got married right after my divorce was final. We sold both of our old houses and bought one together. She's pregnant now, and I think these days we're a pretty average family for our time with 3 kids, each with their own set of parents. But we don't care because we are a happy family. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video. The treachery of demons is nothing compared to the treachery of an angel. Brenna Yovanov. Set in the present day, Charleston, South Carolina is the perfect place for a romantic getaway, especially in the spring and fall when temperatures are moderate. First of all, it has an amazing restaurant scene that can't be compared to any other city in the United States. In addition, palmettos, magnolias, and oaks border the streets with Victorian homes dating back to the early 17th century. History, both good and bad, is in plain sight. Nearby Kiowa Island and Foley Beach make for long walks on the sand as the gentle surf continuously laps the shore. East Bay Street and Murray Boulevard offer great views of the bay. King Street shopping, the downtown market, and the courtyard of the College of Charleston beckon. It's a whole world where visitors get lost in Southern charm. Recently, Ellie Benton immersed herself in Charleston's romantic atmosphere. She grilled a dinner of freshly caught ambergris with just picked radishes and basil, along with southern grits and homemade fresh cookies from a recipe her grandmother passed down to her. Her bacon-wrapped water chestnuts appetizer was almost ready. To top it off, she served a wonderful bottle of 2010 Sauternes Sauvignon Blanc from Dichem of Bordeaux, France, to accompany this dish. For dessert, she had fresh strawberries and cream, which she intended to enjoy in bed with her man after a romantic walk on the beach near the back door of the rented cottage. It was September, the Friday before her 10th wedding anniversary. She knew that her husband Will was organizing an amazing Caribbean cruise trip for them the following week. It was supposed to be a surprise, but she found out about it from his best friend and business partner Corey Parker. The program included at least 2 evening horseback rides on the beach at ports of call, which she knew would lead to outings of a very different kind. The backstory: Will and Corey met in their sophomore year at Duke University, where they were both studying business. They became fast friends and fraternity brothers, joining Sigma Chi. After graduation, they decided to go into business together, a startup tech company that specialized in helping high school students find a college. On average, more than 2.9 million students enroll in colleges and universities across the United States each year. Many of these families have the money to help their children make the best school choice. They broke even in 3 years of operation, and by year 12, the current year, after taxes and expenses, they would each have $250,000. Each year, they learned from market research how to improve their product and optimize services. They were still young and hungry. None of them were driven by money, but once they started making it, they agreed that having it was better than not having it. Although they weren't rich yet, they were on their way to it. Their goal was to buy out a major technology company within the next 3 years and then decide which mountain they wanted to climb next. Will and Ellie met during their sophomore year in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Will and Corey opened their store. Ellie Shriver attended Sweetbriar College, women only, in Sweetbriar, Virginia, 2 hours west of Richmond. She was a member of the equestrian team and majored in equestrian studies. Her dream was to own a stable, or better yet, her own farm. She got her first job out of high school at just such a farm north of Charlotte. She'd met Will when she and Corey led their small group of 6 on an afternoon walk. Neither Will nor Corey knew a damn thing about horses, but decided it would be a fun workday away from the office. Will immediately fell in love with the young woman who was leading their trip. Ellie wasn't dating anyone else and thought Will was cute, friendly, and well-mannered. He managed to get her phone number from one of her coworkers, and he agonizingly waited 3 days before texting her. She was not surprised to hear from him. They both felt some chemistry during the trip, and she agreed to meet him for coffee. 11 months later, they were married and had an amazing honeymoon in September, on horseback, of course, in the Maroon Bells Mountains near Aspen, Colorado. Will didn't allow them to vacation in the great outdoors after the wedding. They took a few-day hikes but returned to the St. Regis Hotel each evening for a relaxing evening that included a combination of ice, whirlpools. Corey, on the other hand, was a bit of a womanizer. He wasn't a boor, but he wasn't ready to be someone's Prince Charming just yet. Ellie had set him up with a couple of girlfriends, but after he was done with each of them within a month or two, she decided it would be wise to keep her friends away from him. She didn't dislike Corey, they were friendly, but she didn't like his dating methods, which she considered immature. She expected him to grow out of this pattern of behavior, but he never seemed interested in doing so. Like Will, he was a very handsome guy. 5'5", tall, dark hair, and deep brown eyes, Corey exercised regularly and was in great physical shape. Unlike Will, who was only slightly shorter in stature, with blonde hair and blue eyes, Corey enjoyed hunting. He bedded most of the women he dated, but seemed to lose interest after the first conquest. Ellie regularly chided him for this. "Corey, you can't just entertain them and then move on," she exclaimed once when he was particularly annoyed. "Of course I can, Elle," he replied with a look of mock offense. "I never promised love or relationships, and they're all adults. Besides, if I ever meet one like you, I might be tempted to settle down." Turning to Will, he added, "Right, brother?" "Leave me out of it," his friend wisely replied, correctly realizing the look on his wife's face. "I may be ugly, but I'm not a fool." He was neither. He was just trying to avoid a disagreement with his loving wife. Meanwhile, at the ranch recently, and so a week before her husband's unexpected wedding anniversary trip, Ellie was humming happily to herself as she prepared for a very romantic dinner. Footsteps on the walkway. "He's almost here." "You're so freaking amazing, Ellie. I'm loving every minute with you." "Damn you, Corey," she said. "I can't believe it. I love you so much." 9 months ago. Corey felt he was close to his goal of entertaining his business partner's wife. Ellie was mad at Corey most of the time, but he took it as part of the game. Corey would love him and leave him for a month or so. She thought it was selfishness on his part. He just wanted it without any commitment. His behavior infuriated Ellie when she had to comfort one of her friends. For Corey, it was all part of the plan. But much more importantly to Corey, it gave him the opportunity to learn details about Ellie from her friends. He was an expert at getting a woman to trust him and open up. He could safely ask seemingly innocuous questions about her without arousing suspicion. It allowed him to figure out how to slowly lure her into his bed. Corey knew he had to be patient in this endeavor. It would be a long-term approach. In his musings, he genuinely cared for his business partner, Will. They had been friends since college, and their budding business was paying off. He enjoyed working with Will and hoped it would continue for many more years to come. No, for Corey it was just a challenge, a dance, as he called it. He was convinced that with enough work and dedication, he could bed any woman, single or married. So far, he'd been almost exclusively single, but Ellie was gorgeous and thought he was an asshole. Corey wasn't going to hurt Will. By winning Ellie over, he would later convince her that they should stop for the sake of her love for Will. Remorse would make her agree, and they would cut their liaisons down to once or twice a year. Will never know about it, and he won't be hurt. To make sure of that, he'll coach Ellie. In the end, everyone wins. For several years, Corey pushed and prodded her. He would infuriate her at times, then apologize for hurting one of her friends. Elle would berate him and complain about him to Will. "Your partner is such an asshole!" she yelled. Eventually, Corey groveled and won her over with his boyish smile and puppy dog eyes. He gave her small gifts, nothing inappropriate, but things he found out she liked. A certain kind of dark chocolate she loved, or a scarf that one of her friends said she liked. He always accompanied them with a sheepish, "I'm bad, but please love me," look that made her feel good in the end. He always knew he was back with her when she hugged him and said, "I still hate your damn guts, but you can be so sweet when you want to be." It was in late January of this year that he had his breakthrough. Shortly before Christmas, he had met, dated, and gone to bed with Joe, Ellie's co-worker at the stable. On the 23rd of January, he was at Will and Ellie's house for a Sunday night soccer game. Corey and Will were drinking beer in Will's room while watching the NFC and AFC championship games. During the second quarter of the AFC game, Allie's phone rang. She grabbed the phone and answered it, leaving the room. Corey and Will heard the first few phrases of her conversation. "Hey, Joe. What's up, girl?" "What? No, you can't be serious. He didn't do it." "Joe, try to calm down and tell me what happened." Silence for about 2 minutes. Then, they heard a chair on the kitchen table being pushed with such force that it fell over and the stomping of feet down the hallway. "That goddamn bastard, I'm gonna kick his ass." Slap. Will looked at Corey, realizing what had happened. "Really, brother? You broke another heart?" "I'm sorry, Will. I know things are hard for you and Ellie, but Joe just wasn't for me and I couldn't leave her." "Corey, when the hell are you gonna grow up?" "Why don't you wait until you realize if you really care about him?" "God damn it, stay away from my wife's friends. She'll yell at you for 10 or 20 minutes, but then she'll bitch at me for at least a week." "Man, I'm sorry, but I gotta listen to you and pull my head out of my ass. One of these days, she might just shoot me." "Well, I don't own a gun, but I can't promise she won't buy one." "Shit!" He intercepted the ball again. A few minutes later, Ellie popped out of the bedroom and ran into Corey. You're such a damn shit, Parker." He realized things were totally bad when she started using his last name. "I'm sorry, Ella, Joe is a nice girl, but She didn't let him finish. "Screw you, Corey. Joe isn't just a nice girl, she's one of my best friends. I told you when I introduced you to her to stay away from her." "I know, Al." "Shut up, Corey!" Ellie yelled, driving herself into a frenzy. She picked up a pillow from the couch and started pounding him with it. She cried, every time you just use them and then toss them aside." "Why, Corey? What the hell are you getting at that you can't just be a decent guy for a wonderful woman like Joe?" Corey managed to get up and move around the couch, trying to increase the distance between himself and his abuser. It was only a pillow, but it was a strong one, and the blows came with force. She stopped for a moment to catch her breath, at which point Corey grabbed his jacket and hurriedly retreated to the front door. "You're acting crazy, Ellie. I'm sorry I hurt Joe, but I think I'd better get out of here and let you cool off. Maybe we can talk when you've calmed down." With those words, he was almost out the door. "Calm down?" "Calm down," she muttered, following close behind him. "You have fun with my friends, you freak, and you tell me to calm down?" She threw a pillow as he closed the door to dodge her final onslaught. But Ellie was so flustered that she opened the door and followed him down the sidewalk. Will sat on the couch, deciding that avoiding this battle was the better part of valor. "I'm not done with you yet, Corey Parker. Get your sorry ass back here," Ellie yelled, following him to his car. Corey had parked in front of the house, not in the driveway, and the hedge blocked the view of anyone looking out of the house to the street. They were alone. Corey raised his hands in a sign of surrender. "Okay, Elle, wait a minute," he said in a calmer voice. "First of all, it's about 28 degrees outside and you're barefoot and only wearing a t-shirt. You better get back inside before you get cold." He didn't want her to get sick from being out in the cold, but he secretly enjoyed the sight the cold made of her nipples. Her teeth were chattering, but she wasn't going to stop. "Screw this, Parker." Then she burst into tears again. "Why, Corey? Please tell me why. You shouldn't be such a jerk to my friends, or any woman for that matter. What is going on with you?" This was the moment he'd been planning for so long, and now it had come. He made a puppy face and replied, "Do you really want to know, Ellie? Are you sure you want me to tell you? Once I do, there's no going back." Ellie was a little surprised at his vulnerability. She'd always thought he was superficial, but in an instant he'd shown her a different side, an intriguing one. "Yes, Corey," she said more calmly. "Please tell me." "Because of you, Ellie, I can't stay with either of them." "I know you're married. Hell, you're married to my best friend. But every time I'm with another woman, all I see is your face. Your face is the only face I want to see. I'm sorry, Ellie, but I'm crazy about you and all I want is to be with you." "But Corey, we can't. I mean, I'm flattered and all. And deep down I care about you, but I can't. We can't." There's a fine line between anger and passion. She didn't realize it at the time, but Corey was going to cross that line. and she willingly agreed. He didn't let her finish her thoughts. He kissed her. He knew the moment of truth had arrived. She would either punch him in the face and go inside, and the dance would be lost, or she would respond. "Oh shit, what have I done?" Ellie said in a barely audible whisper. "Corey, please. I can't do this, not here and not now." What she didn't say was even more telling. She didn't say never. Corey realized he had gone as far as he could go at this point. "Ellie, I'm not going to say I'm sorry, I'm not. I don't want to hurt Will, but you're an amazing woman. I have to go now, but promise me that at the end of this week we can get together and talk things out. We'll just talk at the coffee shop. Nothing more, I promise." "I don't know, Corey, maybe," she whispered. "Go inside, Ellie. It's so cold in here, and Will be out in 10 seconds if you don't come back." He then got into the car, and she hid in the house, brushing her hair and adjusting her t-shirt, trying not to give any indication of herself. When she entered the house, Will was standing by the table with a nervous expression on his face. "I'm sorry, Ella. I know he can be such a jerk. Maybe I should think about getting out of the business and doing something else. Something that won't involve Corey." "My husband is so loving and kind," she thought to herself. "No, baby, I'm just upset. I'm going to take a hot bath and have a glass of wine. Let me relax for a while and then come upstairs and give me a hug, please." Will was loving, kind, and completely oblivious to the fact that his world had just changed drastically for the worse. He had always trusted her. He had never had any reason to doubt her love or devotion to him. "Sure, baby, just relax and take it easy. Tell me when you're ready and I'll come up." Ellie took a long bath. Corey came home, took a hot shower, and collapsed on the bed. She then called for her unknown cuckold to come upstairs and comfort her. 2 days later, at 10:30 a.m., Corey and Allie sat across from each other at a local coffee shop. In the morning, Allie told Will that she was going to talk to Corey more calmly, but very directly. "She needs to clear the air," she told her husband. She hadn't decided what she was going to do yet. It was all confusing, but she knew she had to tell Will. If he happened to find out that they were getting together without him, he would regard it with mild suspicion. "Corey, this can't be happening," Ellie began. He could tell she wasn't convinced. "Allie, I'm never going to force you to do anything, but I sensed your reaction Sunday night." "I know, Corey, something clicked in me and I was pulled there." "But I love Will and I can't. I don't want to hurt him with lies and cheating." "You have to understand that. I don't intend to hurt my friend Ellie, but that's not the same as deciding not to be with you. This could be our secret. You know me, I'm not the marrying kind. No matter how great you are, I'm not going to try to steal you away from him. I don't think I could, even if I wanted to. But don't you want to enjoy this moment together? Don't you want to let yourself go and use our lust for the amazing pleasure it can bring?" "But Will..." "We can have it and make sure Will doesn't find out anything. We both know it won't last. A strong flame goes out the fastest. A few scattered months, maybe a year, and it'll be over. But then we'll have lifelong memories of an impressive bond with an amazing man." He felt her coming to her senses. "I know it would be amazing, Corey, but how can we be sure it won't blow up and ruin my marriage to the man I want to spend the rest of my life with?" "People get caught because they are stupid and careless. Since we are neither, I'm sure we can make sure no one gets hurt." "No, I don't think so," was all she said, briskly getting up and walking out of the cafe. Walking to her car, she was determined, "It's not going to happen." Corey wasn't the least bit embarrassed by this. He knew she had crossed the line and there was no going back. It might take some time, but he would help her take the next few steps. He sat for a while pondering, then grabbed a coffee for Will and headed to the office to lie that Ellie had read him the riot act. The next steps followed a week later. Will needed to drive to Winston-Salem to meet with a couple of technicians they were recruiting from Wake Forest. Knowing she had an evening free, she rode for an hour after work and came home, chilled from the early February temperature. After a shower, she threw on a warm terry cloth robe and headed downstairs to sit by the fireplace enjoying some wine. Will called to let her know that everything was going well and he would be home by lunch the next day. 10 minutes later, there was a light knock on the back door. Startled, Ellie turned around and looked. There stood the devil incarnate, Corey Parker, smiling and holding a 2012 Camus 40th anniversary cab convertible. Something clicked, and without thinking, she swung the door open and threw herself into his arms. There was no one outside on such a cold February night. Corey borrowed one of Will's jackets and put on his cap in case anyone saw him. No one saw. Corey picked her up in his arms, slung her over his shoulder, and carried her upstairs to the Bentons' marital bed. She glared back at him. What are you going to do about Parker, you bastard? I think you should leave right now. You're not man enough for me. You might flash your eyes at my friends and they'll melt, but not at me. I'm not impressed. Get out of my bedroom. In no time, she didn't realize how herself they were at it. Finally, after about 2 hours and another shower, they embraced each other and drifted into slumber. Before drowsiness overtook her, Ellie finally remembered Will. Corey had thoughtfully set the alarm on his phone for 6:30 a.m. He let her sleep in while making coffee and summarizing. They would have to be very careful in the coming months. He was beginning to question whether a brief interlude with her would be enough. Ellie was an incredible woman and lover. She gave him everything he could handle and more. He loved that at times she was submissive and let him take the lead. But she also pushed him like no other woman had ever pushed him, and that thrilled him. Ellie woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and to Corey looking at her with a smile. She got up and headed for the bathroom. A few minutes later, they were sitting side by side, sipping coffee and talking quietly. After finishing their cup, they went to the kitchen for more. 2 hours later, the sheets were washed. Corey was in the office. Will had just gotten into his car, heading for home and his loving wife. The word cheater had never crossed her mind. Like 99.9% of people, she considered herself a basically good person. Maybe what she was doing was wrong, but she didn't allow herself to consider it wrong. I love Will and I will never stop, she thought to herself. She didn't question how acceptable love, fidelity, and adultery with her husband's business partner was. That's the thing, you can't think about betrayal too much. If you think about it, you'll see holes in your arguments and realize you've morally stumbled. So Allie, like so many others, just decided that everything would be okay and moved on with her life. For the next 8 months, Corey and Allie spent at least 1 day a week together, in bed, in the car, on the couch, moonlighting in the park, and even in a remote corner of the giant parking lot at Lowe's Motor Speedway. They never met in the same place more than once, and always at a time when their antics would have been nearly impossible to detect. Hotels were used about every third meeting. Corey would pick a city close enough that it could be charged as a business expense. Ellie, for her part, would tell Will that she needed to look at a horse or investigate a competitor's stable. Following Corey's admonition, Ellie continued to love her husband as she had before. It wasn't hard for her, as she genuinely liked him in so many ways. Will just trusted the hell out of both of them. He'd never suspected anything. When Will had told Corey in August that he planned to surprise Allie with a Caribbean cruise in September for their 10th wedding anniversary, Corey had decided that he would try to spend a weekend with Allie a week or two before. He knew that Ellie was starting to worry that they were out of luck. As Corey had suspected, he hadn't lost interest in her, but he was also determined not to let his girlfriend find out about his betrayal. Perhaps this would be the last fling. Perhaps. Recently, back in Charleston. Dinner can be left for a few minutes, she whispered in his ear. Her cell phone rang, but she ignored it, which turned out to be one of the biggest mistakes of her life, because every cheater eventually gives up at some point. A few minutes later, 3 hours north of Charleston, a blissfully ignorant Will Benton was enjoying a Chinese meal when his cell phone rang. The area code was 843. Thanks to his business, Will knew a lot of codes, especially in the southeast. Charleston? He wondered to himself. He didn't get any calls from customers, and he didn't remember any close friends in the area. Hello. Hi, this is Gemma Hartnell. I'm trying to reach Ellie Benton. Well, you're getting close. This is her husband, Will. Is there anything I can help you with? I'm sorry to bother you on vacation, Mr. Benton, but Mrs. Benton was riding Kiowa with us today, and her wallet must have fallen out of her purse when she left. I guess she hadn't discovered it yet, or she would have come back for it. Anyway, we had her cell phone number that she had booked, but she didn't answer. It was the only number I could find in her wallet, so I decided to give it a try. I'm so glad I got through to you. Before she could continue, Will interrupted her. You told Ellie Benton, right? Yes. Could you confirm her address on her driver's license? Sure, give me a second. 1810 Falling Leaf Drive. That's our address, but there must be some mistake here. Ellie is at a horse show this weekend in Lexington, Kentucky. Will felt his palms begin to sweat. I'm sorry, sir, the young woman on the other end of the line replied. Gemma was starting to get nervous too, not realizing what she had gotten herself into, but wanting to get out as soon as possible. If you speak to her, would you please tell her that her wallet is in our possession at Seabrook Stables? Yes, sorry, Will stammered, trying to make sense of the call. I'll be sure to tell her. I think she's coming by to pick him up tonight or tomorrow. Hanging up the phone, Will walked over to his laptop and opened it to the itinerary Ellie had given him. She had left early in the morning and was due home Sunday night. At the top of the page, he read, Champagne Races, Lexington, Kentucky, the 10th of September 12th. It was a weekend, and from the looks of it, Ellie wasn't there. What was she doing in Charleston or on Kiowa Island? He pondered aloud, not addressing anyone in particular. Why did she lie to me about it? There must be some reasonable explanation. Will was a clever and methodical fellow. He sat down and forced himself to run through every possible scenario. First, she could plan a surprise for the two of them later in the fall, but it could all be done with a laptop. Second, she couldn't set something up for their anniversary since he'd explicitly hinted he was planning a surprise. Third, would there really be a show in Charleston this weekend too? Had she just changed her plans at the last minute and not told him because she didn't want him to think she was flighty? He quickly looked through the schedule on the Charleston Visitors website, looking for anything even remotely horse-related. Nothing. Fourth, something with the sorority sisters she didn't want to tell him about? But why? He wouldn't care if she had a girls' weekend away. None of these or several other ideas made sense. Then he wrote down the last one he didn't want to consider, but he had no choice. First, was she having an affair? A lump immediately rose in his throat and a knot in his stomach. There didn't seem to be any other reasonable explanation. He felt like he'd married the most amazing woman in the world. A beautiful woman, intelligent and gifted, a woman he planned to spend his entire life with, a faithful woman. What should he do? He needed to think and make sense of the situation, but he also needed to pull himself together. He needed to calm down, so he turned to the only name he thought could help him. Corey. He started to press speed dial button #2, but stopped suddenly. Oh shit, he thought, starting to put together the pieces he desperately hoped wouldn't match. Corey's gone to Florida to visit his relatives for the weekend. Right? He flipped through his list until he settled on Marty Parker and dialed the call sign on his cell phone. Will, to what do I owe this honor? I hope you and my son are still fighting in peace. Hey Marty, I'm trying to reach Corey. His phone goes to voicemail, he lied. But he told me he's visiting you and Vera this weekend. Nothing urgent, just a quick question. Is he around? I think you're wrong, Will, Marty replied. Corey told me he'll be in Hilton Head this weekend with a couple of frat buddies. Do you want me to try to get in touch with him? Will tried to keep his cool. Don't worry, Marty, I probably have the whole weekend scheduled. I left him a message, I'm sure he'll call me back. Love, Faith, he barely had time to say before he hung up. This can't be happening, Will tried desperately to reason. Not his best friend and not his wife. Please let it not be true. He sat like that for about an hour, trying to breathe normally and think logically. What should he do? Jump on an airplane, try to find them and face them? That was crazy. There was no way he could know where they were staying if they were together. Ignore it until Sunday night and demand an explanation when Ellie got home? That wouldn't work, because if she was lying, she'd cover her tracks and keep lying. He was sure she'd probably have the bill from the hotel in Lexington to prove it. Ellie wasn't stupid. An hour later, he was no closer to figuring it out, so he typed North Carolina divorce laws into Google. North Carolina was a no-fault divorce state, and they had no children, so the alimony issue fell away. However, alimony is a different issue. Would she want half of his 50% stake in the company? If so, she and Corey would own the majority and they could force him out. Was that really her plan? And what about a fault-based divorce? In chapter 51:6, where the reasons for divorce are bolded, there were 2 words. Adultery. But she had a huge burden of proof, and if she cheated on him with Corey, all he would have was a phone call from a stable employee. Only one thing was clear to him. If Ellie and Corey were having an affair, he was finished. He could refuse the money. He didn't care that much about it anyway. He was a gifted guy and had helped build a very successful company. He could get a well-paying technical job at any firm, or perhaps hang his own. Will also knew he couldn't play detective for the next few months. He also couldn't pretend to be a loving husband during that time, while some private investigator would be doing the digging. It was late Friday night when he finally gave up and decided that the law of diminishing returns was in effect. He was running in circles. He took 3 Tylenol PM pills, set his alarm for 8 a.m. and went to bed. 30 minutes and many tears later, the medication started to take effect. It was past midnight in Charleston when Corey and Ellie sat on the porch after an amazing dinner, a moonlit walk on the beach. When they returned from their walk, Ellie had drawn a bath in a deep antique clawfoot tub and told her lover to wait patiently for her on the double bed. An hour later, they were sitting on the porch talking quietly. "What are we doing, Corey?" "What do you mean?" "It seems to me that you're well aware of what we've been up to." "You're not so smart," she replied, punching him on the shoulder. "Why are we doing this?" "We've been together for over 8 months. You have more girls than you want, and I have a husband I love." The last word stuck in her throat. She felt that she did love her husband deeply, but how could she say it with an honest face, given where she was and what she was doing? Corey knew better than to tease her about her love for Will. Truth be told, he felt a twinge of guilt when she said his name. He'd known him almost 7 years longer than he'd known her. They spent 8 to 10 hours each day in each other's office, planning, revising, tweaking, creating, and developing. Corey had no siblings, so Will was the closest sibling to him. "I don't know, Ellie. I just can't take my thoughts and hands off of you." "I love Will too, but you're memorable to me." "Maybe you just can't get over the fact that Will has something you don't." "Maybe?" "We have this weekend and Will and I are going on a cruise on Tuesday. He can never ever suspect us. But I want to live with Will as my husband and hopefully soon the father of my children." "I hope you're not saying this weekend is our last outing together?" "I'm not sure, but no, I don't think I'm saying that." "It's a little late to tell me I don't have a big head." At precisely 8 o'clock in the morning, Will Benton rose from bed. Slightly staggered from an overabundance of sleeping pills, he forced himself to take a cold shower and dispel the fog. He brewed some coffee and finalized the plan he'd developed over the last half hour. 5 minutes later, he was already dialing the phone number of Sterling's after-hours private investigation service out of Charleston, California. The customer service operator recorded his information and promised that one of their highly trained professionals would call him back in the next 30 minutes. Private investigators only eat what they kill, so the callback came in less than 10. "Mr. Benton, this is Amanda Cunningham. How can I help you?" Will laid it out point by point, which he wrote down. First, his wife, Ellie Benton, said she was going to Lexington for the weekend, but had somehow dropped her purse in the stables on Kiowa Island. Second, he feared she was there with her lover, business partner Corey Parker. Third, if they were there, he had no idea where they were staying, but assumed a private home or cottage, perhaps in a remote location to maintain secrecy. Fourth, they would likely be there until tomorrow afternoon, so time was running out. He needed information and fast. Fifth, he needed hard evidence either way, including photos, videos, audio recordings, etc. Sixth, cost didn't matter. Amanda chuckled quietly upon hearing the last remark. "Don't worry, Mr. Benton. Once we receive your 50% deposit, our team will find them, if they are here, and see what they are up to. We don't just call ourselves highly trained professionals to try to attract business. Our small firm of 5 has over 3 decades of experience in surveillance, spycraft, and covert operations. I'll have their location within the hour." They chatted for another 15 minutes as Will wanted to know a little more before shelling out the $6,000 down payment. Her answers were accurate and convincing. Will took her account information and made a wire transfer. They agreed that she would call him no later than noon with an update. About that time, Ellie busied herself listening to her voicemail left the night before. She also realized that she had forgotten to call Will to see how he was doing. She did so from the Mustang while Corey was driving her back to Kiowa to get her wallet. Her call went to voicemail, and she left Will a very loving and very dishonest message about horses and a miserable breakfast at the North Lexington Courtyard Marriott Hotel. She sincerely assured him that she would enjoy everything he had planned for the following week in honor of their 10th anniversary. When they arrived in Seabrook, she ran into the office and pulled out her wallet. Gemma wasn't working that morning and so didn't recognize Will's call. They decided to go shopping on King Street and have a lunch of shrimp and grits at slightly north of Broad. Snob for locals. While Will gave Amanda and her team time to work, he contacted Ed Simmons, a longtime friend of his father's and a prominent attorney. Ed was getting ready to play at the Cedarwood Golf and Country Club when he got the call. He decided to answer it. After a 5-minute conversation, he apologized to his playing partners, gave his caddy the lightest tip of $100, and headed straight for the house at 1810 Falling Leaf Drive. Ed and Will spent 90 minutes reviewing the initial information to determine Will's best course of action once the information came back. Ed correctly surmised that Will's wife was cheating with someone, possibly Corey. At 11:57, Will's cell phone rang. On the other end was Amanda. She summarized what they had learned so far. First, Ellie was definitely in town and had ridden at Seabrook yesterday. She had been there earlier in the morning with a man in a red Mustang convertible who had reached for her wallet. The man fit the description of Mr. Corey Parker. Second, Mr. Parker rented the car from National Car Rental and listed as his local address a single cottage on the far north end of Folly Island, somewhat separated from the other houses and quite secluded. Third, the couple then spent 2 hours shopping downtown on King Street. 10 minutes ago, they had been sitting in the Snob restaurant ordering lunch. She was sure it was shrimp and grits, but she wasn't sure. Fourth, while they were gone, the cottage had surveillance equipment and recording devices set up. "How the hell did you find all this out so quickly?" exclaimed Will. Before Amanda could respond, Ed stepped into the conversation. "Miss Cunningham, this is Ed Simmons, Mr. Benton's attorney." "Mrs. Cunningham, but call me Amanda, Mr. Simmons." "My apologies, Amanda, call me Ed. Unfortunately, you and I will be speaking several times in the coming weeks, so I would like to ask you to follow some protocols to help my client deal with this unfortunate set of circumstances. Do you mind if I record this conversation?" "Yes, of course." "Before I do, would you mind transferring my client's down payment?" "I have the account information and I've already sent you the deposit. My firm is now officially taking over your services on behalf of my client. All invoices should be sent to me at the email address I will give you." "Yes, I understand. One of my assistants is reviewing that page now, and we will reimburse Mr. Benton immediately." "Great, thank you. Now here's what I need you and your team to do. For the next 30 minutes, Will listened with rapt attention as these two highly trained professionals laid out the plan of attack. He was amazed at the way they interacted. Amanda listened attentively and only entered the conversation when she thought she had an idea on how best to carry out what Ed had in mind. Ed, for his part, was willing to listen to other ideas and accepted several of her suggestions. "Thank you, Amanda," Ed said finally. "I'll let you get back to work, as you have a lot to do and very little time to do it." "Understood," Amanda replied, disconnecting. "Will, I need to know your goal. Do you want to pursue reconciliation or divorce? I wouldn't want to put you on such a tight deadline. Normally, I always advise a client to take time and think things through, but I'm not sure you can afford that luxury right now. It's okay if the plan changes along the way, but I need to know what direction to take next." Will didn't like rash behavior, but that didn't seem to make sense. "I loved her with all my heart and believed she would return that love to me. She betrayed me in our marriage. My partner did the same thing to me in our business. This is not a crazy drunken moment at a company holiday party. This is willful infidelity, and I can't get over it. This may not be the first time they've been together. Since she intentionally broke her vows and my partner is just as callously abusing our partnership, I want them both out of my life as soon as possible. Nothing I can or will come up with can encourage me to stay married to her or continue to do business with him. If it costs me every penny, so be it, but I want them out of my life, and I want them to feel the pain I feel today." As he spoke, tears appeared in his eyes. Ed reached across the table and put his arm around his shoulders in reassurance. "Okay, Will, if we hear from Amanda and the team what we think, here's what you're going to do." By Sunday afternoon, Ellie was very concerned. She had called Will 5 times. 3 times on Saturday and twice on Sunday morning. All she got in response was a polite but curt text reply. Busy with crisis, talk to you Sunday night. Enjoy Lexington. She showed the message to Corey and asked him to call Will to find out what was going on. She assumed it was a business problem, but in the back of her mind she wondered, he can't know, can he? How can I call him, Ellie? Asked Corey. He hasn't contacted me to let me know about any problems in the office. If I call, what do I say? Hi, Will. Ellie and I are in Charleston, but she thinks we're having problems at work, so she asked me to contact you. Damn, you're right. I'm not thinking straight, his lover replied. It must be work. There's no way he could have guessed that. You told him you're visiting your folks this weekend, so maybe he just doesn't want to interrupt that. Yeah, I guess he does, Corey replied, not really convinced. After showering before heading to the airport, they tried to make love, but Corey realized that Ellis's attention was focused on Charlotte and didn't push it. 3 minutes after they pulled away from the cottage, an AT&T van pulled up. 2 workers entered the house to disassemble and reassemble their equipment. 30 minutes later, Amanda and her 2 assistants were going through tapes and recordings. An hour later, one of the men remarked, Damn, what stamina they have! Corey dropped Ellie off at the front desk and headed to return the rental car. At that moment, his cell phone rang. It was his father. What's up, Dad? Hey, son, just checking in to see how you're doing. Hope it's fun in Hilton Head. Yep, really not hitting the ball very aptly, but we played some golf and had some great seafood. Are you and Mom okay? Sure. Listen, son, I won't keep you, but Friday night I got a call from Will looking for you. For some reason, he thought you were coming to visit us for the weekend. I reminded him you were at HH, but that surprised me because he doesn't make mistakes like that. Is he okay? Corey felt his stomach roll up to his throat and tried desperately to speak normally. He's had a lot on his mind lately, Dad. I think he and Ellie want to start a family, and he's a little worried about being a father. I'm sure he just got the dates mixed up. I'm still coming up in 3 weeks for the weekend. His answer seemed to convince his father. They chatted for a couple more minutes and then hung up. Corey decided not to tell Ellie. It's probably nothing, and I don't want to upset her before the flight home. They flew separately to back up, and their flights were on time. Since Ellie only had carry-on luggage, she went straight to her car in the long-term parking lot and drove home. She was still worked up, but after calming down, she regained her composure as she drove 25 minutes from the airport. Traffic was heavy on Sunday night, so she made it on time. She couldn't wait to see Will and make sure her charade wasn't solved. She would be a tired wife from the long weekend, but so happy to see her husband. She would shower and jump on his bones. As it turned out, she didn't have to pretend, nor did she get a chance to jump on his bones. When she pulled into the driveway and pressed the button for the remote that opened the garage door, she got her first clue, though she didn't pay attention to it. The remote wasn't working. Damn dead battery, she thought. Then she noticed that the house was dark. Only the porch light was on. She headed toward the front door with her roller bag. As she approached, she saw an envelope taped to the front door with her name printed on it. She slipped it under her arm and inserted the key into the lock. She tried several times to open the door, but the key wouldn't work. A shiver began to hit her. She let go of the bag and sat down in one of the Adirondack chairs on the front porch. She tore open the note and burst into tears a moment later. Mrs. Benton. In this note, I inform you that your husband, Will Benton, has engaged my services as an attorney. It has come to my client's attention that you are having an adulterous and illicit affair with his business partner, Corey Parker. It has come to his attention that you have not been in Lexington, Kentucky, but have been in Charleston, South Carolina, with your lover, the aforementioned Mr. Parker, for the past several days. And so on. First, through my office, Mr. Benton will provide evidence that he knows of your treachery toward him and your marriage to Mr. Parker. Second, Mr. Benton has changed the locks on his residence and asks that you find another place to live as soon as possible. As you will recall, the mortgage is in his name only, so you have no legal right to enter the house without his permission. Third, also please do not attempt to contact my client. He will be contacting you through my office within the next week for an initial separation and divorce conversation. Fourth, Mr. Benton will give you a fair opportunity to enter the home under appropriate supervision and retrieve your personal belongings as early as tomorrow morning. Again, I ask that you contact me, not Mr. Benton, to make these arrangements. Fifth, I recommend that you contact an attorney regarding this matter. When you do, please provide them with my name and contact information. Sixth, Mr. Benton has assured me that there are sufficient funds in your joint account to cover any immediate expenses, such as living expenses, should you need it. Please use your Bank of America debit card as all joint credit cards have been paid off and canceled. He asked me to tell you that it may be in your best financial interest to ask Mr. Parker if you can stay with him. Sincerely, Edward M. Simmons, Attorney at Law, Simmons, and Wyckoff. It took Ellie a few minutes to gather her thoughts. She began trying to contact Will on the phone, either ignoring or forgetting the instructions she had just read. 5 minutes later, she received a message from Ed Simmons. Mrs. Benton, I must insist that you respect my client's wishes not to attempt to contact him directly. Ellie sat up and stared at the message on the screen. Across town, Corey Parker's keys worked in his apartment, but he was also the recipient of a note from Simmons, and Wyckoff. To Mr. Corey Parker. From Edward Simmons, Attorney at Law, Simmons, and Wyckoff. It has come to the attention of my client, your business partner, Mr. William J. Benton, that you engaged in an illicit relationship with his wife, resulting in her being found guilty. In addition, during the initial financial audit conducted by Randolph Michaels, CPA, CFI, MAF, it came to my client's attention that company funds had been fraudulently used to fund at least 8 affairs between you and Mrs. Eleanor Benton. To avoid both criminal and civil prosecution, my client, Mr. Benton, would like to discuss terminating the partnership and purchasing your 50% interest in the company. You should contact a lawyer and financial advisor regarding this matter. Please do not attempt to contact my client directly. Please direct all desired communications to me at eds@ssw.com. Any violation of this requirement will be considered a breach of the terms set forth in paragraph 3 above and will result in immediate legal and civil action against you. Corey Parker began to curse himself. Damn, how many times have I taken Ellie out of the game and attributed it to client business entertainment? Then he realized that he had already electronically sent about $1,000 from this past weekend to their accountant for reimbursement. He knew Will rarely scrutinized expenses line by line, and Diane's accountant had no reason to suspect him of fraud. The annual independent audit had been completed 2 weeks ago, and they had found no discrepancies. He figured that since it was such a small amount of money involved, no one would notice. The total amount couldn't have been more than a few $1,000, but there was definitely a pattern that a son of a bitch like Michaels could have detected. Screw me. He spent the rest of the night sipping bourbon and trying to figure out how to start circling his proverbial wagons. He was more successful with the bourbon than figuring out how to proceed. Ellie called and texted him over a dozen times during the evening. He ignored them all. Damn, bitch, I got enough problems of my own. Deal with your shit and leave me alone, he thought. How quickly the shaky foundation of a relationship built on lust crumbles. Ellie sat on the porch of her house, or former porch depending on how one perceived the results, numb with shock. Somehow her husband knew far more than she trusted him to know. Her lover, she now used that term loosely, ignored her calls and texts. I guess I know where I stand with him, that bastard. If Ellie had thought about it for once, she would have realized that Corey might be good at business and a good friend at all times, but he would never risk himself for her. I betrayed a guy who's willing to die for me for an asshole who doesn't care about me. The tears flowed again. Meanwhile, in the guest house by the heated pool at Ed Simmons' residence, Will and Ed were putting the finishing touches on the house, contemplating the next steps. Looking around, Will realized he had hired the right person. Without a doubt, Ed Simmons, an attorney, was a master of his craft. He had enlisted another senior partner, 2 junior partners, and a paralegal on Sunday night to attend the war council. The thought crossed Will's mind, this is going to cost me a lot of money. However, this revelation made him smile. Especially for that rogue bitch. Ed assured Will that both Ellie and Corey would be recovering and hiring lawyers by tomorrow. He knew that the first few salvos would be either denial, which would be easily handled by the small mountain of evidence they had already obtained, or attempts to lower the price to limit the damage and save their reputations. He advised Will to go about his usual business and be patient. "I doubt I'll have anything for you until the middle of the week, so go to work, keep your head down, don't talk to strangers. And no matter what, never take candy from anyone who drives around in questionable vans." Simmons laughed heartily at his own joke, put his arm around Will's shoulders and said, "Don't worry, son. You're in the loving arms of Simmons, and Wyckoff?" Will wasn't sure if he could go home or not. He was afraid Ellie would stubbornly sit on the porch and wait for him in ambush. Things aren't what they seem. It didn't mean anything, just sex. "Please, baby, I'm sure we can work this out. I only love you." Ed was 2 steps ahead of him. He spoke on his cell phone for a moment, then turned to his new favorite customer and grinned. "One of my guys just walked by and suggested she leave the premises as she was trespassing." She tried to be indignant. "I'm waiting for my husband at my house." Then he started laughing. "My boyfriend suggested that if it was her house, she should enter it with her key, at which point she became enraged." He pretended to call the police to report a potentially violent intruder, while speaking loud enough for her to hear him. She left quickly. Will smiled, but Ed noticed the smile was sad. "Stupid bitch," he thought. For the next few days, Will did everything he was told, following the lawyer's instructions exactly. By Tuesday afternoon, he had changed his cell phone number because there was no way Ellie could take it that he had no desire to talk to her. The situation at the office was complicated. On the advice of his attorney, Corey decided to work from home. "You don't want to be seen as intrusive or refusing business, like admitting your partner is right," he was advised. Will valued honesty. He told the small staff that he and Corey had some differences that were being worked out. For the time being, they should treat him as a partner. He assured everyone that the difficulties would be short-lived and things would be resolved soon. Whether he believed what he was saying or not remained to be seen. Ellie continued to work at the stables, but became so distracted that her employer asked what was wrong. She explained that something wasn't going well between her and Will, without revealing any details. Her boss, Stephanie, hugged her and advised her to hang in there. Ellie was also having trouble finding a competent lawyer. Lawyers want to know all the facts up front. Because it became clear after she told the whole truth that there was little hope for any significant payout, her first 2 attorneys turned her down. She eventually turned to an ambulance chaser named Seth Moore. He assured her that he had handled bigger cases than this and would get a lot of money from the settlement. He wanted her to have enough money to give him a retainer that would cover this month's office rent and still have a little left over for a night at his favorite strip bar. Maybe if she's desperate in a few weeks, she'll sleep with me in exchange for services rendered? Neither Mr. Moore nor Corey's lawyer, James Abernathy, had the time. Ed Simmons was a successful trial lawyer with an impeccable reputation. He was deeply connected to the powerful in Charlotte's legal circles. He pushed for a speedy hearing as soon as Ellie received the subpoena 2 days after returning home. Abernathy was a tougher nut to crack than Ellie's incompetent lawyer, but even he realized he wasn't playing to win. He realized that dragging the case out for months, a year or 2, was beyond his client's means. By the end of the 2nd week, he advised his client to offer to sell his part of the business at a favorable price that would allow Corey time to get back on his feet and pay his legal fees. Corey authorized Abernathy to make an offer to sell at 80 cents on the dollar. Simmons received the offer to sell and advised Will to offer 10 cents on the dollar. "We'll probably end up settling somewhere around 30. I know Abernathy well, and even though he sees the situation for what it is, he'll still negotiate hard." Will wanted Corey to feel his pain. 10 cents on the dollar would bring his former friend back to square one financially. That would be fair. But Will also knew he had to listen to his lawyer. If they got 30 cents on the dollar, it would certainly hit Corey hard. He would leave the rest to fate or to a later date, whichever came first. 3 days later, Ed, true to his word, made a deal on Will's behalf. 28 cents on the dollar. He relayed to Will over the phone. "Not as much as you'd hoped, but still, that's a pretty big win for you." Will thanked him. Now Ed spoke of real pain. "Will, you're going to have to sit down with Ellie and talk. The judge will want to know what you've done to reach out and talk to her, even if you intend to divorce. It's always better to have answers before the judge asks you questions. We drew the Honorable Kim Landis in our divorce petition, It could have been better. It could have been much worse, so overall it's fine. However, she is committed to trying to mend relationships, so she will have questions about counseling. Perhaps she will even demand it. I won't bore you with the details right now, but I will say that it's time to talk. I'll make the arrangements. We'll start by having the attorney in the room, but then I think it would be wise for you to just sit and talk to her alone. Prove that you can have a calm and cordial conversation despite being deeply hurt. It will help us prove to you that you are a reasonable person. Will hung his head, realizing that Ed was right, but dreading this moment. All right, Ed. You're right. Let's set it up. Ed looked at his young client and felt sad. Ed Simmons was once young and had his heart broken by his first sweetheart. Ed had paid his way through college with an ROTC scholarship and was serving at the rank of first lieutenant when the first Gulf War broke out. He was attached to the 1st Infantry Division, mechanized, better known as the Big Red One. He served under Brigadier General Andrew C. Gainey, and they kicked each other's asses. At home, however, his love Becky decided not to wait for her man. Ed was devastated, but with the help of friends and family, he coped. He knew that Will would be okay in the long run. In truth, he knew he would be better off without his cheating wife, but now was not the time for that. Will would realize that in time. Now was the time to talk to him and let him know he wasn't alone. Ed might have been a harsh son of a bitch, but he had a big heart and it ached for his client. The meeting was set for mid-afternoon the following Friday. Ed wanted Will to have the weekend off so he could recover after a couple hours of hard work. Both parties agreed that they would spend the first 30 minutes or so with the attorney, and then Will and Ellie would be alone. Ellie and Seth Moore arrived on time. Seth was dressed in a surtout off the rack, probably from JCPenney. Ellie was dressed in a modest light blue sundress that came down below her knees and a maroon sweater. Her hair was gathered into a ponytail, and she wore Michael Kors sunglasses. Ed and Will stood as they entered the most private conference room at Simmons, and Wyckoff, which meant the other party would have to traverse several hallways and corridors. Ed wanted to make sure Moore understood what he was facing. He knew that Seth's office was 15 feet from his 3-seater behind the desk from IKEA, where his assistant stripper Molly worked when he could afford to pay her. Will had always been in love with Ellie, and a lump rose in his throat at the sight of her now. Even after her betrayal, she was still beautiful in his eyes. He managed a polite smile, but he avoided looking at her in a way that could be perceived as love. "It's good to see you, Will," she said, looking at him intently, perhaps trying to see if there was any affection in his heart for her. Will nodded. "Ellie, thanks for coming." Ed mimed a poker face, but inwardly thought to himself, "Young man, don't let her see shit." "Shall we begin?" he said loudly, inviting everyone to sit down. "Yes, thank you," Seth cut in, perhaps deciding he wanted to build momentum in his direction. "My client has agreed to this meeting to find out what her husband is proposing as an attempt to save their marriage." Ed interrupted him by picking up a 6-inch thick folder from the end of his desk and held it out to opposing counsel. "What's this?" his colleague inquired. "I'm not sure we're ready to accept any documents today." "Counselor," Ed began, wanting to get rid of this prick as soon as possible. "This is approximately 50% of our file, indicating adultery and betrayal of marriage vows on the part of your client. To avoid redundancy, we haven't included anything repetitive. You will find notes and photographs of her activity in Charleston, South Carolina 3 weeks ago. In addition, we have witnesses from the hotel staff who will confirm that they saw your client with her lover, Mr. Corey Parker, who registered under false names as husband and wife. These liaisons took place over a period of 6 months. Our team of investigators have conducted a thorough background check to clearly articulate our claims. There is no ambiguity or heresy here, just cold, hard, verifiable data." Ellie shuddered as Ed explained the contents of the folder. The realization that this man had seen the photos made her clam up. He smiled politely. Together under a moonlit sky or lying side by side in the candlelight and champagne, it was all so exotic and exciting. In the light of day, she began to realize that her choice had been a betrayal to a good and loving man. She struggled to keep her composure. Ed placed a second folder on the table. This one was much thinner, only 2 pages. "Counselor, this is my client's proposal to his wife for a divorce settlement." Then, looking directly at Ellie for extra convincing, he continued. "Personally, I think the terms are super generous. If it were up to me, I'd be willing to lay it all out to the judge so she could see the ugly truth of this deliberate betrayal on Mrs. Benton's part. Mr. Benton, however, being a man of character, persuaded me to make the offer. His experience and knowledge of legal litigation was paying off. Ellie looked defeated and Moore was clearly out of sorts. Ed knew they wouldn't come to an agreement today. The first hearing was still 2 weeks away, and there was always correspondence before appearing before the judge. Will's offer was harsh, given the circumstances, but more than fair, given that his wife had betrayed his love and trust. First, Will offered a lump sum of $75,000 in exchange for Ellie agreeing to become sole owner of the company from now and forever. She must agree to give up any futures claims. Second, she and Will split the proceeds from the sale of the house between them. It won't be too much since they've only lived in it for 5 years. Maybe $10,000 each. Third, Ellie would keep the car, but would have to start making payments on her own starting 1 month after the divorce. Fourth, Ellie could take any furniture in the house except the marital bed and an antique rocking chair set given by Will's grandmother when they married. Will intended to burn the bed in the backyard before leaving the house, which he eventually did. Fifth, Ellie will keep all of the jewelry Will bought for her, except for her engagement and wedding rings. These must be returned no later than the day of the divorce judgment. Sixth, Ellie must agree that the grounds for divorce are her adultery. There was an explanation on the page that laid out the agreement in more detail, but the main points were simple and straightforward. My client and I will take this under advisement and get back to you with our counteroffer by early next week. Miller replied, trying to sound as if his client held the moral high ground. I can tell you, however, that Mrs. Benton will not accept her husband's demand that her rings be returned to her. Stillman inwardly turned purple at the insolence of this chump, but, as usual, showed nothing on his face. When he spoke, however, he leaned across the table. Seth, you and I know that your client repeatedly and willfully broke her marriage vows with Corey Parker. She did so knowing full well that her actions could destroy my client's emotional well-being, as well as her ability to continue in business with her partner. That is why they orchestrated a grand cover-up to keep my client in the dark. Her behavior was cruel and heartless. If you want to play this out in front of Judge Landis, be my guest. I would welcome the opportunity to meet you face-to-face in her courtroom. I'll be frank with you. You have no case. Your client cheated and lied. We have mountains of evidence, and we will not savor it, but we will make it all public at trial if you try to do my client any more harm than she has already suffered. If I don't hear back from you by noon Tuesday, the offer will be considered null and void. I'll see you in court then. Moore huffed and puffed, but even a lawyer of his low level knew that his opponent held all the cards. This settlement would be a decent payday for him. He'd get $10,000 before taxes, which was more than he usually made in 2 months. If there's nothing else, Stillman said, getting up and buttoning his jacket, I suppose we should give the Bentons a few minutes for a private conversation. Moore stood up and extended his hand to Ed. We'll be in touch, was all he said. Ed shook his hand and then quickly headed to the men's room to wash his own. Will and Ellie were left alone. Ed advised his client to never speak first. As the injured party, he should insist by his silence that his ex-wife speak first. After the door closed behind the departing attorneys, there was an awkward silence for a moment. Will looked at Ellie. Ellie stared at the floor. Finally, she spoke. I have no excuses, Will. If I could take it all back, I would. My behavior has caused you great harm, and I will carry it with me for the rest of my life. To say I'm sorry or that it meant nothing would only be more disrespectful, but I want you to know how crushed I am when I think about how horribly I treated you. Believe what you want, Ellie, it doesn't matter to me, was all Will replied. She continued, Is there any hope for us, Will? Do you think with maybe some help, maybe counseling, we can get through this? I don't want a divorce. I never have. I'll do anything you ask, I just want us to be together. Will was trying hard not to explode. She'd had her cake and now she wanted to eat it. And it was all on him. Ellie, if the court orders counseling, I'll go. There was a flicker of hope in his wife's lying eyes. But know this, I don't have the slightest desire to be with you again. I have loved you. I gave you my heart, mind, and soul. And you repaid me by entertaining my former best friend. I don't even know what you are, Ellie, except that you're a whore. I will never touch you again, and I will never have children with you. You need my forgiveness, but you've ruined any hope of it. Ellie physically turned pale at his words. Will, do you hate me that much? Yes, Ellie, I do hate me today. The fact that you ask me questions like that shows your true nature, which is thinking only of yourself. But I'm planning for the long term, and my goal is to get over any emotions I have for you as soon as possible. My intention is not to care about you, not love or pity or anything else. My intention is to not think about you at all. You are not worth this pain? I've spent thousands of kisses and years of my life on you. I trusted you, Ellie, with everything, and you took it all away. You'll get on your feet or on your back, whatever you have to do to survive, but none of it will be with me. You'll have your horses and your stallion, that should be enough for you. Ellie went through a couple more options. Never speaking to Corey again, seeing a psychiatrist to understand why she made the choices she did. All of them went unanswered. After another 30 minutes, the conversation was over. Aren't you going to walk me to my car? One last moment together, she concluded. Walk Ellie or call Corey. Ask him to come get you and get back into bed with him. I'm done. Will stood up and started to leave, but she turned to him with one last comment. We had everything, Ellie, and you blew it. Over the next few days, Seth Moore, the attorney, did his best to get Simmons to concede on some of the demands in the divorce petition. He might as well have been talking to the wall in his office, as long as it did him some good. After the second conversation, Simmons stopped returning his calls. The Tuesday deadline was approaching, and Ellie knew she had little chance of getting more than Will was offering. On Monday, Corey did call her and offered to meet and comfort each other. Allie, desperate for any affection, agreed to meet him at his condo. She arrived at 8 p.m. and stayed the night. Corey didn't treat Ellie very well. It was pathetic, but that was what she had come to. Simmons had a man assigned to Corey's apartment who recorded her coming and going. When she left in the morning, it was obvious she had been badly mucked up. Her mascara and lipstick were smeared, and she looked like a whore leaving her house. The investigator smirked and returned the evidence to Simmons, and Wyckoff. Later that morning, when Ed was going over them with one of his assistants, he muttered, "No one could be that stupid." When Ellie returned to the studio apartment she'd rented month after month, she called Moore and told him to accept the divorce petition unchanged. He tried to argue with him. She hung up on him. The date for the first hearing came up. Judge Landis proved to be as tough as her reputation. She examined both sides of the case, asking pointed questions. Moore was like a man on a sinking life raft with sharks circling over him. Desperate is the only appropriate word to describe his case. Simmons was also questioned, but he was impeccably prepared. He gave plenty of answers before he was asked, and when he was asked, he had more than enough ammunition in his legal pistol. Landis also peppered both spouses with questions. Will was prepared masterfully. Ellie, not so much. At the end of the hearing, Judge Landis said, "Well, the evidence in this case seems overwhelming. I'll take a couple months to review them and perhaps get back to both attorneys with additional questions. If and when I call, I expect immediate answers. Is that clear to you?" Both attorneys answered in the affirmative. Landis always had a lot on her plate, so it was 3 months before she brought the parties back together. It is clear from the evidence that this is an egregious case of adultery. There are almost always two sides to every crumbling marriage, but damn it, Mrs. Benton, I can't see any plausible reason why you would leave your husband for Mr. Parker. As I understand it, the aforementioned sold his part of the business for pennies, thus confirming my opinion. Ordinarily, I would have scheduled a consultation, but I believe Mrs. Benton's cruel betrayal makes any reconciliation unattainable. Mrs. Benton, I can only most strongly urge you to think hard about your life choices and try to live a better life, on your own, in the future. Mr. Benton's petition for divorce and its terms are granted. The marriage is dissolved and the proceedings are adjourned. No slaps or cheers erupted from Will's side of the courtroom. Will and Ed shook hands grimly. Seth Moore hurriedly withdrew, leaving his client sitting at the table. Ellie rose and left the courtroom all alone. Will began a new life alone, suffering but knowing he was not alone. 5 months after the divorce agreement was finalized, Corey was leaving his apartment when he slipped and fell down 3 flights of stairs. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital. At the time of the accident, his blood alcohol level was 0.15, almost twice the legal limit. He did not remember anything about the accident. His insurance ran out while he was looking for a new job. Hospital bills had eaten up all of his savings. Will learned of the fall while driving through Smoky Mountain National Park. He smiled, thinking, nothing could have happened to a nicer guy. Police investigated and discovered that earlier that evening he had been entertaining his girlfriend, Miss Ellie Shriver. From the obvious traces, detectives discovered that they were lovers, and Corey was getting a little something on the side. Ellie was found guilty of aggravated assault and sentenced to 3 years in prison. It was not a pleasant experience. To this day, Corey walks with a severe limp. He works at a local junior college as a tech support worker. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.